live coverage of the Mountain Dew 500 from Hickory, North Carolina.
Hello, everyone. Cousin Cale here at the inaugural Jack Ingram 111 here at Hickory Motor Speedway.
The Z-Max Car Store comes to Hickory Motor Speedway.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hickory on a beautiful 80-degree Easter Saturday. Mike Joy with Neil Bonnet. Steve Grissom leads them down the green with Earnhardt alongside.
It's a sizzling Saturday night at the Hickory Motor Speedway.
A tricky little dish composed mostly of hard left turns, but with enough straights to eliminate the tourists.
For Glenn Jarrett and Neil Bonnet, Mike Joy congratulating Tommy Houston on a great victory here at his home track, Hickory.
Off turn 2, it's a freight train of late models thundering down the back straightaway of America's most famous short track.
The real key to Hickory is how well you have the car getting up off the corner here. You have to handle well.
On a blustery afternoon in Hickory, North Carolina, you are looking at one of America's most famous short tracks, the birthplace of NASCAR stars. This is the Hickory Motor Speedway.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to America's most famous podcast. I'm Bryson Davis alongside Cale Lineberger, the play-by-play guy for Flow Racing at Hickory Motor Speedway. And Cale, it's good to be back with you for episode number 2 of America's most famous podcast.
Absolutely, Bryson. Episode 2, we've got a lot of ground to cover. Had a lot going on at the Speedway this weekend and nationally. Anxious to get that done here for the race fans. And best part of all is getting to work with you again on a Monday night.
Yeah, man, it's pretty cool. I had a lot of fun. We had a good response from the first episode last week. I think a lot of people liked it. It was good to have Michael on. We look forward to having some more drivers on in the future, and just kind of highlighting Hickory because, you know, as we saw week 1, we were so excited about doing this because we had a really good race. And we had a similar situation this past weekend on Saturday night. We had a really good night of racing, and a lot of people tuned in on Flow. A lot of people at the Speedway, even though it was kind of a chilly night at the racetrack, and it was windy again. That was a thing. It was a killer again. The wind.
Yeah, that wind was pretty rough. It got late in the evening, and it they said it was going to be about 40 with a wind chill of say in the mid 30s, and it felt like it. It
really did, and I wonder like. Sometimes I feel like me personally, I'm always asking questions because I'm not a driver. I've never been a driver, haven't been in a race car, never drove around Hickory. And so I've ridden a pace car, so I guess that counts a little bit. But I always feel like I ask really dumb questions. Sometimes I'm really scared to ask drivers questions because I feel like they think that I'm just crazy. But I was talking with some guys in the pits during practice, and I was asking them about the wind. You know, I was like, this has to make it difficult to have this kind of wind. And they were like, yeah, it's kind of a challenge. Especially, and there was a lot of guys that practiced throughout the week, so they did some test runs and stuff, and talking with them, and they were like, well, the conditions today are totally different, so the car's going to drive a little bit different, and things are going to be slightly different, but the track was fast. It wasn't as fast as week 1. I don't think we broke any records this weekend, did we?
No, we didn't set any records this week. Still had some really good lap times from some of the guys. I mean, I was looking earlier, the Auto Group, Paramount Auto Group Limited late model guys. Zach Bruinger, he qualified still at a pretty blistering pace, 15:085. They were on used tires this week, whereas they were on new tires on week 1. So that's kind of the difference maker there. But those guys, I mean, they could have qualified pretty decent in the late model race.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, they're like they're pretty much right up there with them. There were several guys in probably top 5 of the field that could have fit in with the late models and probably been competitive there in the limiteds. We had some really good racing at Hickory. The Cup Series and NASCAR went to Phoenix. They saw some good racing. Did you watch the race on Sunday?
I did. I watched that race start to finish. It was good. It was nice to see the deal with the 2 tire compounds. I was kind of anxious to see how well that would work. I know they used it at the All-Star race last season, and something I felt like that they could make a good run of it. It brings some different strategy into it. And what I felt like we saw with most of the teams waiting and at least leaving one set of reds available for right there at the end of the race is kind of what I felt like was going to happen. I mean, you figure a 500-lap race at a place like that, I mean, most of those guys aren't going to go out and burn a set, midway through it unless you're looking for track position or something of that nature. But you can see some of those guys that, didn't have 2 sets at the end kind of hung themselves out to dry. Joey Logano, I know, was kind of one of those that, strategy just really wasn't on their side. Still had a decent car, but just didn't have what they needed to get it done. But How about that Christopher Bell, man? I didn't see him coming out this strong at the first of the season.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Like, Christopher Bell has been a part of the majority of Joe Gibbs Racing's last, like, I think they're 12 wins. I saw the stat today. Out of 12 wins, he's got like 6 or 7 of them, I think, out of the last 12 wins that JGR has. And I mean, that's like, I just saw they had pictures. Him and Denny Hamlin are the only 2 drivers to win in the last 12 wins for JGR. So I thought that was pretty cool. I think Christopher Bell is a guy, and obviously probably not now. He's won 3 in a row, but going into the season, I think he's a guy that gets overlooked a lot. I don't think a lot of people put their money on the 20 car, and I mean they do now. Obviously, you're dumb not to, but I think to see him come out and be so successful just over the last couple of weeks, Atlanta, Coda, and now Phoenix, just pretty much puts him up at the top. And he's the first driver to win 3 in a row with this next gen car. So I just think Christopher Bell is a huge talent. You know, he comes from a dirt background. So I always love watching the drivers that come from that kind of a background because I think they bring a different approach. They have a unique talent, I think, compared to some other drivers. So just to see him be so successful, even when it came down to a green white checkered, you had a 2-lap shootout there at the end. And honestly, with the way Denny Hamlin had a fast car there at the end, and I think he would have been in contention even if we didn't have the caution. But when you do have the caution come out, now Denny Hamlin is in the picture. And so Christopher Bell is, you know, he has to hold him off and play a little bit more defense. And he even said in post-race interviews he thought he had the race loss, but it just worked out for him. And 3 in a row is pretty impressive. I think it's awesome.
And I tell you, I was really surprised. I really thought Kyle Larson was going to press the issue on that last lap because when they were coming through turns 3 and 4, I really thought he was going to get down on the bottom and do something. But I tell you, and he's I'll talk him up as much as we can because he is, as far as I'm concerned, he's Hickory Motor Speedway royalty. How about Josh Berry running up the top 10 virtually all day and coming up with a top 5 finish? They said that's the best that the Woods brothers have started and finished at Phoenix. I'm pretty sure they said ever, as far as and the starts that he's got already this season, and just everything really seems to be clicking for those guys.
It really does. Josh Berry is a really good fit for that team and organization, and he has Sunday he put them in contention and they ran up front. I mean, they were up there all day, and so like you said, from start to finish, from the green flag to the checkered flag, they were just so consistent and they were up there and running well. And it was just a solid run for the Wood brothers. And I love to see it. You know, we're biased towards Josh Berry. We've seen him run a lot of races at Hickory. But Josh, you know, couldn't have a better guy. Josh Berry's just a good dude. And it's good to see him and the Wood brothers together being paired up and having some success on a good, solid day like we saw Sunday.
Yeah, because I would dare say, I mean, you know, the Woods brothers as a whole haven't necessarily had the best success the last few years. I know whenever they had Harrison Burton driving for them, just seemed like they struggled to get their footing. I will say that I feel like that things seem to be clicking for them so far since Barry's got their, so far this season. But season's still early, and I wish those guys the best. They've definitely got as good equipment now since they're, affiliated with Penske. And have been for several years now. They've got as good of equipment as they've had probably in years since they've come together and done that. So I really hope that works out for those guys, because I know whenever Stuart Haas Racing kind of disbanded last year, the 4-car team goes down essentially to a 1-car team, and a lot of those guys ended up with good rides. Barry's over there with the Woods brothers. I saw, and I love his modified racing. The one that drives the 60. His name leaves me right off.
Ryan Priest.
Yes, Ryan Priest. He had a great run yesterday. I mean, I was pulling for him because I felt like he really had a hot rod there for a while about midway through the race.
Yeah, he did. And that kind of makes me think too, the option tire. So we talked a little bit about that. What your thoughts of the option tire? You like it, right? You think this is a good idea?
I think it's a good idea. The only thing I maybe would have liked to have seen is maybe them had 3 sets of those. Perhaps, but at the same time, I mean, if you only give them 1 or 2 sets, when's that team going to use it? Nobody's going to not try to save a set for the end. You get a caution with, 100 or less laps to go. I want to say they said the fuel window was right around 90 laps. that's going to be what you put on. You're going to go in the pits and you're having to put on tires. You're going to put the soft tires on. I mean, there's just no question about that.
Yeah.
It's not like, a race at Hickory or Martinsville, like with a mod car or something like that. I mean, tire conservation is important. None of those guys wanted to burn any of their stuff up. But I don't know. I feel like if you only have 2 sets, maybe the first set you can figure on burning somewhere in the middle of the race, which, again, some of those guys did. But that's the biggest thing I noticed is at the end of that race, the top 15, 18 cars all had their option tires on.
Yeah, they did. I like the option tire, and honestly, if it were my decision, and obviously it's not, I don't get paid the big bucks, but if I was in charge of making the decision, I would say, hey, just take the red tire, take the option tire, and throw the other one out, because I like to have a little bit of tire wear. I think it puts on a good race. I saw it firsthand at Wilkesboro last year, and I just think now I'm kind of 50-50 here. I like that they have an option and they have a route that makes the teams generate some more strategy, because now, that gives something, and we're broadcasters, right? So the guys in the booth, it's another thing for them to talk about, another thing for the fans to look for, and everybody has a different approach. So you're able to see what works and what doesn't, but all these different strategies coming together puts on a pretty good race, because you have people coming, saving their option tires, guys using it early. So you're going to see those guys driving up through the field. And I just think, I think it's a good thing, but I would honestly say that I would be fine with just keeping the option tire on these short tracks. Take a track that's a mile or less and offer the option tire, and just put that on the cars. And honestly, I think that's going to put on a good race, and I'd be okay with that.
I agree with you. That's something they've struggled with at the Cup level for the last few years since this new car came out, is getting short track racing where it was before. I mean, with the old car, Bristol, Martinsville, Richmond, any of those tracks that were fairly small, the car put on a great show. And it could be argued that the super speedway stuff really wasn't there with the old car. And this car seems to have kind of flip-flopped, went the other way, where the super speedway racing's great. It's close, it's packed. You can still, generate those runs and get around and stuff. But the short track package has been, to get around somebody, you had to bump them out of the way because the tire wouldn't wear out fast enough. There was no conservation. I think, when you talk about that softer or the option tire, look what kind of race it brought out at Martinsville last year. I mean, it just, really
think about Bristol.
made a better
Remember
showcase.
That? Yeah. Remember the way Bristol was when they had a really soft compound, and they come out there, and this is the first time for a lot of these guys that they were having to kind of learn on site how to save the tires.
How to actually migrate that, and or mitigate that. And there's a lot to be said for that, because a lot of those guys haven't had that experience in this new car.
Yeah, they really haven't. And I think the new car over the years has really grown on me personally. The first race, I think it was the first race I saw on the new car. It was at Charlotte. It was a Coke 600 that first year. I think it was 2022. Is that the first year? I think it was.
That sounds right.
And the Coke 600, it's our longest race. A lot of people say, why you want to go to that one? You're going to be there forever. But for that entire race, that was one of the best races that I had ever seen at Charlotte, or even on one of our speedway tracks as a whole. It was just a great race. And so I thought, wow, this car is able to put on a good race at these speedways, which we had kind of been complaining about for probably the last decade. And so when we come out and have such a good race here, it's like, well, you're giving up your short track racing a little bit, but there are ways to kind of control that and sort of bring that back. And I think Goodyear has really done a good job with the option tire. I would like to see it stay. If they have the option, fine. If they just use that tire, I'm fine with that too. But I think going to a track like Bristol, Martinsville, Richmond, even Wilkesboro, I want to see some tire wear. I want to see guys come and go, and I want the drivers. If you're a Cup driver, you should be challenged in every way. I think these guys are the best of the best, and they are. But this adds another challenge to them that guys used to face. They haven't in the last couple of years, but now they're going to have to start kind of, controlling their tire wear and using the ways that they're driving to add that into part of the strategy. It's a whole nother thing for them to have to deal with inside the car, but it's going to put on great racing for the fans, and we certainly saw that at Phoenix on Sunday. And Ryan Preece, just for example, after putting on the option tires there about towards the end of the race, I think it was midway, maybe closer to midway through the race, he restarted 33rd, was able to work his way up past Christopher Bell for the lead. So on those option tires, he was fast, and that put on good racing because the guy's driving up through the field. So do I like the option tires? Absolutely. I say let's keep them and use them on the short tracks.
One thing I do want to point out before we move on, and it's something it always really gets me sometimes as to what is the issue: brake failures. We saw, I believe it was 2 cars, totally just went, things went sideways for them. Bubba Wallace being one of them. I can't remember who the second one was, but they were talking about, you could see the right front tire lock up and then shards of rotor on the racetrack. And then obviously the driver's in the wall and their day's done. And I don't know what they have to do to fix that. I mean, I know that you'd like to sit here and think that it's not a big deal, but I don't remember brake failures very, very rarely happening with the old setup, with the old car. And I hate to keep bringing the old car back up, but it was a good car too. But this new car, this is something that they're in it 3 years. They're not nearly as bad as they were the first season they had it. Yep. But I don't understand the brake failures, and that perplexes me a little bit. That's not something that we've seen in years past. I even think about back to the 90s when it was nothing. You'd go to Bristol or Martinsville or whatever, and them rascals be glowing all night long. But and you never had the problems. But it's like with this new one, when they get it hot and then it has a chance to cool down. I wonder if it's a thermal shock kind of thing where it's just getting so hot as you're trying to drive it through the corner, and then you have a long enough straightaway to really cool it down. Is it shocking it and then it has a problem with cracking and flying apart, or is it just get fatigued? And I would, I obviously don't have an engineering degree, so I can't say what for sure that would be, but it does, it's, one of those things that I wonder coming from an automotive background.
Yeah. And this is something that I have no knowledge to talk about anything like, I don't have any reasoning for it, but it does kind of make you curious and wonder, like, why is this happening more now than in the past? What's causing the issue? And we see it a lot, really. So
yeah, more than what you would think so. I mean, you obviously don't see it at Talladega or Daytona because they're not really riding the brakes much, but your mile and a half, that seems to be where the where the problem is and where the fatigue's at.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Just because this is a completely random thought, but you were talking about super speedway racing being really good, and we didn't really have a chance to talk about the 500, so we don't really have to go into the race and break it down. But I want to know your take on super speedway racing. A lot of people were frustrated after the 500 because there's a ton of fuel saving that is going on during this race, and guys riding around barely using the throttle, and it's just kind of a freight train riding around Daytona up until the end of the race. So what is your take on that? And if you think it's
that is the one piece in the super speedway stuff, and I don't know what the answer is, that they need to fix that. I feel like the race at Atlanta was better than the race at Daytona because you had a whole lot more passing, pushing, and shoving, and a lot more what I consider racing instead of riding around. I know that's been something that people have fussed about the last year to 2 years, is the whole fuel conservation thing. I don't know. Is it maybe changing the tire package on them, making it to where, the tire wears out before the fuel goes away, or maybe we pack less gas in them, or, I don't know what the answer to that is, but I'm glad you brought that up because that is something that, that's the part that keeps kind of sticking out to people, especially the casual fan of like, well, I want to go out here and watch gas mileage. I'll go drive my Toyota Camry down the road and get 40 miles to the gallon. If that's all we're gonna do is ride around. And I don't agree with that particular style of racing, but it's close when it's like that. It's definitely packed up, but it just, I don't know. I've never been a huge fan of pack racing anyway like that. I still remember the days where they were going 200 plus in the 80s before they put plates on them. But, and sometimes I kind of wish it was that way still, but I don't know. It's almost like that's a Band-Aid. They have been trying to figure out what size to put on since I want to say plates came out in 88 or 89. I'm sure one of our viewers will probably correct me on that, but I know I'm thinking late 80s or at the very early, very latest 90. And it just, I don't know. It just changes the dynamic. You can't generate those high energy runs and slingshot past somebody at those things. And, like I say, even Atlanta's pretty packed, but you still have a lot more passing, a lot more runs generated there than you do at Daytona and Talladega.
I think if we could get Daytona and Talladega to look like Atlanta, then we have figured it out.
Right, and that's where I'm at.
Yeah, 100%.
Even Michigan puts on a good race now. I used to despise watching the Michigan race with the old car because it was just always a snoozer.
Yeah, but it's all these humongous fast tracks. We've got to find. I mean, Daytona and Talladega being specific, we've got to figure out a way. I think something interesting that I have heard is with the stage breaks. You remember a couple of years ago when we didn't throw yellows for stage breaks at the road course?
Yep.
Right. So doing that at doing that on these super speedways, adding that to the list, I think is a way that you could, because then they're going to have to pit when they have to pit, and so regardless,
they'll have to pit under green.
Right, they're going to have to come in under green, and so I think you maybe fix a little bit of it that way. I think that's something to look at, but certainly something to look at. I was just curious as to where you were sitting on that, because that may be one of the few things that we haven't talked about in the booth. And honestly, I was just curious as to where you're sitting on it. But I think we can fix it. I mean, and here's the thing: getting everybody to be on board with fixing it, because it looks really good on TV when you have 3 cars side by side, all those lead changes, even if they're only running 40% throttle. The pictures are good and the videos are good, and so it's good for your fans that are just people that maybe aren't fans of NASCAR, and they're looking at that saying, "Wow, that is really cool." So the visual aspect of it is really cool, but as you watch the race, you're honestly it's just a bunch of parade laps, and there has to be a way to fix it. But I think, maybe they will. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's one of those things in time. I mean, they don't want to. Biggest thing I see, and again, not try to get too far off on a tangent, but I know Kevin Harvick talked a lot about it during pre-race. They've got to get the rule stuff cinched, like where they were, given the penalty to Austin Cindric for right hooking the guy at Coda.
Yeah,
I feel like maybe that should have been a little harsher. And I feel like NASCAR's got to get that iron fist that they've, I've always felt like they've had. I've always said that, and this has just been my opinion, that NASCAR is like, the Gestapo of auto racing, and the fact that, they're the ones that make the rules. They're the ones that set it, and this is how it has to be. And I feel like some of those calls, however hard to make, they've been a little flaky on. And I feel like, sometimes that's, and I know that's hard. I mean, we even talked with our boss, the promoter at Hickory, and race control and stuff. And, some of those guys, when you're in the heat of the moment and you have to make hard calls, that's really difficult. But I feel like at the Cup level, they have so much technology there. They've got CMT data they can go back and look at immediately. They've got all these camera angles.
And this decision wasn't made immediately. They had
no, they waited till Monday to make it, and I still feel like they got it. This is my opinion. I feel like they got it wrong.
Yeah, 100%. And the reason I feel like this is I feel like in the old days of NASCAR, like you're talking about, everybody knew what they could do and what they couldn't do. Of course, and I'm talking with on-track racing. Okay, in the sport of football, if you jump over the line of scrimmage before the ball is snapped, you're offsides. Okay, there's no gray area to that. That is a guaranteed that a penalty is going to be thrown. Okay, in NASCAR, if you right hook somebody, it should not depend on what track you're at, what point of the speedway you're on, how fast you're going. The fact that you right hook somebody should be a penalty. And if 3 or 4 guys in the past have been penalized with race suspensions for right hooking somebody into the wall, and they've been suspended. Chase Elliott did it. Kyle Busch has done it.
Yep.
There's multiple drivers that have done it. All of these guys received 1 race suspensions. Austin Cindric does not. And I think the explanation for this was they're sort of at a slower part of the racetrack. They weren't completely flying, right? They're not at Charlotte going 180 down the front straightaway into the dogleg.
But I don't feel like that's one of those things that leaves it up for discussion. I mean,
no.
Right hooking somebody at 50 miles an hour or 150 miles an hour, it's not safe, first of all.
No.
And there are other ways to handle your frustration and, taking care of that.
Yeah. And if you right hook somebody, that should be a given. This is the penalty for doing this. Cause and effect. There
And I'm
should
sure
not be
NASCAR doesn't want to make that pull because, I mean, you got Austin Cindric. He's got great sponsors,
right.
and they're friends of the sport. And, you don't – he's got sponsor commitments. But at the same time, as the driver, you
It's his
also have to
responsibility.
be the one that's thinking about those exact same things of, is this good for my image? Is this
Yep.
good for my team and my sport? And if you can't answer yes to most of those things, then maybe you really shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I agree. I honestly, I don't care what the rule book says. I just want it to be consistent. I don't want any gray area. Now, there's some areas, uh, certain things that situations are different, and so uh, penalties, they have to be a little bit different. But in this case, it should be a given, and I just that's where I'm at on it, and I don't really necessarily agree with that, and I feel safe saying that, knowing that 99% of the motorsports world is on the same page as us, and hey, NASCAR, we got to do something about it.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit now. Let's talk about where we were at this weekend. Let's talk about the race at Hickory. Doug's Fleet and Auto Glass, not at the races. We saw first of all, how about the pace car? What'd you think of that?
Man, and you tell the story about that, because I thought that was really cool whenever you got to talk to Randy earlier in the night about how different that was for him and
Mhm.
in that big old van.
Yeah, so Randy was getting him a cheeseburger, and I think I was up there ordering a sun drop or something, and getting our pre-race concessions before the big lines and everything. So he's always up there hanging out on the front stretch before they got to go to work. Him and Scott Flagman, uh, they were all up there talking, and so I went over and asked him. I'm like, "Hey man, I heard you got a unique pace car tonight. You're gonna be driving something a little different." He said, "Man, have you seen that thing?" He said, "I'm gonna drive that thing for every race tonight." He said, "And I don't have a clue how it's gonna do coming off of turn 4 whenever I go into the pits." He said, "I'm honestly a little bit worried because that thing's kind of top heavy." And I said, "Man, you know." I told him he was a good driver and I trusted him, but honestly, I was anxious to see how it worked because that Kia that he always drives, the regular pace car, is pretty low to the ground. He said I can just whip that thing anywhere and it'll go. And so when they're coming to one to go and they're about to start the race, he leaves the field and comes down on the pit lane pretty fast. Which it might not look that fast, but I can tell you I've been in it when he does that, and I was out the window trying to record, take some pictures and stuff when I was riding around with him, and he almost threw me out of the thing. So I learned very quickly not to do that, but he's going at a pretty good speed when he's coming on the pit road, and it's a tight turn. So he's like, man, I just don't want to flip this thing. But he did a good job and driving that thing and controlling it. But I just thought that was funny. It was cool to see that and the fact that they did that. And Randy, he's awesome. He's a lot of fun, and we were just picking around about it. But it was cool to see, and they're great sponsors, great friends of the track, and so I think we had a successful night.
Yeah, Doug's night was always good, and I want to give a shout out to him on the show. If you guys weren't there at the Speedway, may not have known this. We did this during Pole Awards. That they threw in an extra $100 to each person, to each winner of the pole in their respective divisions, and that's pretty cool. I mean, I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but I mean, we had 5 different divisions being supported there at the racetrack this weekend, and man, that's $500, and it might not sound like a lot to some, but I feel like, little nice gestures you can do there to some of those guys. It gives them a little extra incentive, and helps buy a couple gallons of Sunoco race fuel.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking to the drivers when we were doing our pole awards, and I think every single one of them was like, they were thanking Doug for doing that and helping them out, and a couple of them was saying what they were going to do with it. So that was pretty cool. But cool that they did that, and we had a great race. Qualifying was pretty fun. I don't know that we say that all the time, but we had a lot of guys, fighting back and forth for climbing to the top of the leaderboard. One guy would go number one, then the next guy, and then the next guy, and it was like, who's going to win this pole? And that happened all across the board last night, or this past weekend. So just really good racing. 75 laps for the late models, so they had a unique race, a little bit longer for them. Carolina Pro guys were there. Of course, our street stocks, and then the Renegades were there racing as well. You had limited late models, which was a good race. But let's start with the street stock race. Easton Brewer winning the pole in that one. early incident. What did you think of that race?
I thought that race was great. A lot of back and forth, and as bad as I know that they hated it happened, I guess you'd say probably the most exciting part of the race when Easton Bruder and Cody DeMarmles were both going for the lead, and he thought he had him cleared and was just a little bit short. And but both those guys spun on the front stretch just to act, grace of God, they didn't hit anything as far as anybody else or the inside retaining wall. I saw DeMarmles. I thought he was going to go head first into that inside retaining wall and was able to miss it. So that was such a blessing for him. But and then getting to watch those guys drive back through the field.
Yeah. So it actually made the race really exciting for the fans. I know it wasn't exciting for those guys because they were stressed out, throughout the race. Both of them got a top 3 finish. Easton wound up winning the race, which was pretty impressive. He obviously had a very fast car, but just the way that he drove up through the field and with Cody alongside of him, because those guys restarted together at the back. Then they were able to drive up through the field. Easton took the lead away, and then Cody, I think he had some damage to the front end, and he just didn't have the drive that he did before. Would have been interesting to see, what happened between the two of them if we had stayed green, if that didn't happen. But even though it did, they ended up with a solid night, so a solid finish for both guys, and Easton pulling away the win. But yeah, it was a good race, always exciting, and again, you had Easton Brewer picking up a win, who's been very fast over the last 2 weeks now, and I think he's going to be one to certainly watch in our Street Stock Series, competing right up there with Cody DeMarmles, who seems like he's just winning left and right. Easton got the pole and ran pretty well, come back and won the race. So kudos.
And a couple of the older veterans, just a good shout out to them. John Reynolds coming home with a second place finish. Mm-hmm. He's been in the hunt. They've been in the hunt every week and working on that. Reynolds Farm Chevrolet, and Gary Ledbetter. He's picking up right where they left off last season, with getting all the bugs worked out of that new car.
Yeah.
So, and Marshall Sutton still, top 10 for him. He finished in 5th. Mm-hmm. And, the veterans aren't letting the young guys get the best of them.
No, Marshall, I always like to make a pit walk before the race and just go around and see how everybody's doing. You pick up a lot of storylines that way. See, what's this guy been dealing with today? How's the car? Are they, facing anything? What's the stories for us to tell? What do you want us to tell today? And I always love talking to Marshall because, honestly, just going back there and hanging out with those guys is a lot of fun, first of all. But Marshall is just a great guy. He has raced at Hickory for a very long time. He's got a ton of wins, a couple track championships, and he's got a new car down there, and he had it sitting out, and it's a good looking street stock. But he said he didn't think, he said, I don't think we've got it dialed in. It's not where I wanted. I'm going to stick with Old Faithful tonight. And he did get a top 5 finish, but he did tell me, he said, these young guys around here, man, he said, they're wanting me to leave because he said, you got to leave some room for these young guys. But he said, I'm just not sure if I'm ready to give it up yet. So Marshall, he'll be racing for, I told him, I said, he's got another decade of racing or more. I said, he'll be there for forever. But we had a really good race in the street stocks. I love the street stocks. I love the race they put on. I love the way the cars look. I like those throwback paint schemes. A lot of them like to run, and it's just a really good racing product, and I love it.
Yeah, me too. It's just one of my favorite divisions by far, with the paint schemes, the look, the whole, just, kind of rehashing what you said there, but it, just reminds me days of old.
Yeah. And bring us back to our roots, the old days of Hickory Motor Speedway, and you get a little piece of that when they come onto the track. The Renegades have a similar effect, and we saw a pretty good race with the Renegades last Saturday night. Steve Smart picking up the win on that feature. He finished P2, I believe, week number 1, so they were able to get up past Gary there and pick up the win. So a good night for Steve. Starting off the season strong.
Yeah, and a big shout out to him too for the just on behalf of the Speedway. He is the sole reason, he and the Smart Electric guys, as to why the new Jumbotron works. So Steve, if you happen to see this, we really do appreciate that. I know I've had a handful of conversation with Kevin and with Nick about that, and lot of work went into making that happen in such a short period of time.
Yeah, man. I love that thing. That thing is awesome. The fact that we can throw replays up there and it's just it brings us to the next level. It's awesome. So I love it, and I love it because you can see where every car is at, and in qualifying, you can no longer only see the top five. You can see the entire field as they qualify. So now those drivers get that feeling of seeing their number rise to the top of the leaderboard, whereas before we just were able to show the car and their time. Now we can show it all. So kudos to him for helping us out on that. I love it. Jumbotron is awesome, and I'll never stop saying that. That thing will never grow old. It's awesome.
No, coming back, I know me and you're both huge fans of pro wrestling, and I remember back in the day the WWF Titantron was a big deal, and it even added more more to the show. And I feel like something like that at a racetrack. I mean, you sit and think about places like Charlotte and Bristol and Martinsville, all these other places have got these big screens and stuff, and that's a big screen for Hickory Motor Speedway that we have, and it's just so many neat things that we can do with that now.
Yeah, man, it's cool. So now let's talk a little bit about the limited race, which I think was what a lot of people tuned in for. For obvious reasons, we had Wyatt Miller came in and ran a really good race, but just the fact that he was there, it was his first race in a limited late model, first race at Hickory, and he put on a pretty good show there at the end. But that race, I personally think our limited late models put on some of the best racing that we see. Just as the season goes on, those guys always come very competitive, and it's never you never really have one guy that stands out. It's a whole field of cars that are competitive and fighting for the win. Um, Will Aldred was very fast last week and picks up a win this week. I think it was cool to see him run up front. He had a fast car, didn't start up front in that race, so we had a lot of comers and goers in that 35 lap feature. What did you think?
I agree with you. I know that those guys, of course, he races for Charlie Watson in that number 9. So he's got great equipment. But and I was just looking at some of the stats from that race. He was gained the most positions of anybody. William Alder did, and man, he's an aggressive fella. To talk to him, he's usually pretty nice, fairly well spoken. Just a good old country fella, as I like to say. Never met a stranger. Always will. Most of those guys, he and his team, they'll talk to you and stuff. And glad to see them get get it where they've got it together. I know he even made mention that wasn't real super excited about how they qualified, but really able to drive up there. And I was just checking about Wyatt Miller there. That is his first asphalt race. I'm not sure if it's ever, but it was his first asphalt race this season. I went back and looked at his stats on my race pass, and he's raced some dirt stuff so far this season. But that is the best he has done all year in any of his racing endeavors, at least according to that. And I don't know, man. I'm kind of floored by that. Young man, he can really get around there. And, who does that on their first trip to Hickory? Not many people can go in any car. It doesn't matter whether it's a street stock or a late model, limited late model, what have you, and run the way he did and run aggressively. I mean, he ran with, I felt like he ran a great race. He was aggressive when he needed to be, but still had some finesse to it too. And I was really impressed with the young man.
I was too, and first of all, I just thought it was cool that he was there. Going back to that conversation we had about the dirt background with pavement racers, I think when you've spent a lot of time racing on dirt, you bring a different approach to racing on pavement, and I always think those guys are almost a step ahead than some guys that just start out pavement racing, because there's just a talent that comes with that. But for Wyatt, he comes into the place. His great grandfather Ralph, his name is on the wall out there in the front, and obviously his grandfather Dale Earnhardt has won races, ran a ton of races there at Hickory. His mom, even Kelly Earnhardt Miller, she ran races back there in the 90s, and of course Dale Jr. The whole family has been at Hickory Motor Speedway, and just watching them on social media, seeing some of Dale's tweets, I think it was pretty cool for them with the historic aspect of it and kind of the full circle moment. So it was cool to just witness that and kind of see that come around. But as far as him as a driver, he was very impressive, and he was very fast in practice. Qualified pretty decent, and he comes out during the race. The last 10 laps, he really woke up and just started driving that thing. Man, used the bumper, wasn't afraid of that. You would think a lot of young guys at his age coming to a place like Hickory, and you're racing with guys from all ages, all types of experience, and he's coming out using the bumper to try to get around Will Aldridge there towards the end. Didn't wreck anybody. He rattled a few cages, but he didn't wreck anybody. And I just thought, he put on a phenomenal show. And for that to be his first race at Hickory in a limited late model, I mean, I think he did great. The kid's going to have a great career. Obviously, he's got a good backing with Junior Motorsports, but just really impressive. Really cool to see him at the track. And I think maybe we'll see him back in the future. I don't know what kind of races they're looking to run, but he put on a show. And just looking back at the highlights on Flow, it was just a great race.
Yeah, that was. I would say if I had to pick my favorite one of the night, that was it.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Great racing all over, a bunch of comers and goers. A couple guys had some heartbreak. It's a few of them, just had a rough night. Aiden King was one of those ones. Started up front on the outside pole, had some problems during the race, and Walter Jenkins, his first time at Hickory Motor Speedway. We had a chance to talk with his dad for a few minutes up in the booth. He was asking us a few questions, and really nice fella. And he was really excited about that race for his son, and just unfortunate ended up with a last place finish of no doing of their own. They were running up front.
Yeah.
And just that's the way it can be at Hickory. Anytime you think you got things kind of figured out, got it in the bag, going to have a good weekend, and then it just it goes sideways for you.
Yeah, man. So moving on to the Leapfrog Landscape and Late Models, they saw some pretty good racing. They had a unique race, 75 laps. Typically, they're used to running twin 40s. So you start your first race, you have the invert, and so most guys are used to running that extra 40 later in the night. Tracks change a little bit, so kind of two separate races. This was combined into one. So winning the pole meant a lot during this one. Michael Bumgarner came on the show last week, told us that he sucked at qualifying. That was his words. He said, "I suck at qualifying, so it was cool to get the pole, And I told him that in his post-race interview was, you told us you sucked at qualifying, you come out and win your second pole in a row. So I don't know if that really stands anymore, but good young driver. He's cool, and to win the pole, that meant a lot for him because he was able to get out front and stay there. And honestly, he had a good enough car to kind of control the race. He got a pretty good lead there, and honestly, that race, they just stretched out, and it ended up being a good race. But for Michael, just a dominant performance, similar to what we saw Graham Holler do in the Twin 40 2 weeks ago, the last one. So late models had a good race.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of those guys are really competitive, picking up spots. And you talked about Graham Holler there just a minute ago. He didn't gain any spots. He qualified really well. Qualified third, finished there. He was one of a handful of cars that qualified in the sub 15 second range. And I feel like those guys, since they got that new car late last season, they've really stepped up their program, and they're doing great things over there. And we're going to try to have him on the show sometime whenever he's got a little time. He's also got a landscaping business, if I'm not mistaken, that he does and runs. So he's been pretty busy, but we're actively trying to get him on. And then I feel like the mover pretty much was Austin McDaniel, coming up 3 spots, finishing in P2. You had a chance to talk with him trackside. That was their first time to Hickory, which we've only, it's only our second week, but first time he's been there in a hot minute, first time this season. And he seemed like he was pretty excited about coming back for more.
I think so. And we talked about him a lot on the broadcast because every other lap he was passing somebody, and just put on some good racing, and he worked his way up to the front, had a good showing. So yeah, Austin McDaniel had a very fast car, and he ran pretty good. P2 finish, not too bad.
No, not at all.
Yep. So I will be interested because Graham is he's won a lot of races at Hickory in his early career, and I'm anxious to talk to him. I was talking to him a little bit today, and that's actually what he's doing. He's got that business, and he runs it. So I don't know how he does both, but the man is busy as can be. But he's pretty dang good race car driver. So hopefully we'll hear from him. Got to hear from him post race interviews. He said, he didn't fire off well. Obviously lost a couple spots, but was able to drive back up and get that solid finish. So for a long race like that, certainly helping him out as he moves on to the season. And again, it's really early in the year. So still a lot of work to do for these guys, especially somebody like him, because they've got that new car. They've done a lot of work on it and done some testing and things, but I'm sure there's still bugs that you work out, even weeks and months after, just trying to dial it in. And so for them to still be competitive up front is pretty impressive. So kudos to them. Great race in relate models, and it's fun to watch.
For sure, it's always a good time. I would say heartbreak award for that division particularly was Thomas Bean. I was really surprised. They had a lot of trouble. Ended up in a situation up front where he got the front end of that car bent up a little bit, and seemed like it really caused a lot of problems with him being able to see. He rode around for a few more laps. Not sure if maybe knocked something out or maybe the car started overheating or something too, and brought it in nose first. Thomas, he was probably one of the nicest ones to us when we went down there on practice day and stuff. Those guys are always really kind whenever we get when the media guys go down there and talk to them and stuff. So
nobody really gets excited when the media rolls around, huh?
That's right. Well, we try to be the good media,
Yeah,
But
I would like to think that we are. I would say we're good media. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's just funny. Nobody looks for the media. But hey, no, heartbreaker for him, man. I mean, he had a fast car, and it just, like you said, I don't know. I haven't talked to him. I wish we could have kind of got a chance to chat with him a little bit just to kind of see. I'd like to know sort of what went down with him. But I think, partially visibility thing. But yeah, man, heartbreaker for those guys.
Well, moving right along, we'll go to the last thing that happened at the racetrack. This was not televised on Flow, but we did have the Carolina Pro Late Models in town for 100 laps. And I got to say, sitting there watching that one, it was very interesting. Lots of hard racing. I was really surprised. Those guys usually, and not necessarily of any doing of their own, but usually have a lot of cautions, a lot of wrecks, a lot of spins. Didn't see a lot of that. I can say that's not to say there wasn't some hard racing. These guys were beating and banging on each other, but I would have to say, and in my own self, I think that she did a great job driving this week, coming fresh off of a Cars Tour Pro Late Model win was Jade Avandezian, the Clovis, California native. She got her second win in 2 weeks in a pretty hard class.
Yeah. That's pretty impressive to see her pick up a win. I know she was a big story of the week after the week she had with the Cars Tour, and she had a guy that I was speaking with on the roof. They were doing some video and using some ghost car technology. He was teaching me all about that. It was pretty cool. He was able to take her car and another car and compare them, and just the same way they do on TV, and make a ghost car just for kind of learning. And it blew my mind. It was way above anything I could have ever imagined would be possible, but it's pretty cool. So yeah, kudos to her. Big win.
Shout out to Hickory Motor Speedway alumni. He came away with a great finish in his first Carolina Pro Late Model race. Trey Knight coming in the top 5. He finished in 5th place. Started 4th. He lost 1 spot, but saw on his social media this week that they're still working the bugs out, trying to, since they've moved up. Again, he won the track championship for the Paramount Auto Group Limited Late Models last season, so they're doing some of this racing this year. And I look for Trey to do good things with that traveling series. He's gotten to be where he's a really good racer. He does really well at Hickory every week, as well as up the road in Caldwell County. And I think he's going to be good whatever races. We'll have to see if maybe we can get in touch with him sometime and see kind of what his plans are for the season. What kind of racing he's planning on doing and where he's going to be. But I think that's a pretty strong showing on their first weekend out.
Yeah, man, for sure. Put on a great race. So I guess that's pretty much it. We have a week off from Flow Racing because the past guys are coming into town. So they've got their annual race and that'll be this weekend. And then we'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll still put out a podcast. I think we'll still uh, come up with a show, and cause I mean, why not? But those guys will be there. So still going to be great racing at Hickory Motor Speedway. This is the event that William Byron won back in 2022 when he came. And that was just fun to watch. When these guys come to town, it's always a good race. So still no reason not to be at Hickory Motor Speedway. Going to be a great event this coming weekend. And then we'll be back with some more of the NASCAR Advanced Auto Parts Weekly Series in a couple of weeks. So 2 weeks away. And I'm excited to be back for that.
Me too. Join us next Monday or next Tuesday, Tuesday, whenever we get the show out. We're going to try to get some of our drivers, maybe try to get a couple inside scoops with some of our normal weekly drivers at Hickory Motor Speedway, and not just in late models, but in a couple other divisions. We're going to see if maybe we can't get with Wyatt Miller's people, see if we can get a word with him, see what he thought about his first trip to America's most famous short track. Not making any promises there, race fans, but we're gonna give it a shot. And I think next week's going to be good to maybe give some people a little bit of insight on how some of these guys are viewing the 25 season, what's working and not working for their race team. But I'm excited, man. These podcasts I know this is on our second one, but I get jacked up for these, getting to talk racing with you. I mean, I know we do it for 2 to 5 hours on a Saturday night, but it's just not the same as being able to just kind of get here, use a Southern term, get the meat and potatoes, unbox it, buckle down a little bit, talk about it, and tell it how it is from a couple boys' point of view from Alexander and Catawba County.
Yeah, man. I'm just from Taylorsville. Like I'm not real educated. I don't really know what's going on, but I understand racing. That's part of it at a young age. That's something I've always just been able to understand. They go around, they turn left, and it's fun to watch. So I can sit around and talk about that for a little bit. But no, man, it's been a lot of fun. The podcast is fun. I just, my main goal behind this and ideas are just kind of highlight the racetrack, but I want to highlight the drivers. A lot of guys coming through in their young careers, and they've all got sponsors and people that they represent and that help them a ton. And at every level, street stocks, renegades, limited late models, and then up to our super lates and everybody. I just, I want to give them kind of a platform to tell their stories. Honestly, I'm just as curious as some people may be. I want to hear about their stories, where they came from. A lot of guys may not be like you and I. Like I was born and raised in Taylorsville, so I've been surrounded by the greatest racetracks ever known to man my whole entire life. But a lot of people don't have that background, and maybe a lot of guys. Just talking with Aiden King and his dad at the track the other day. He comes from Farmington, Missouri. Moved to Florida, did some racing down there with the Legend cars, and then came back up here. Now he's running for a championship at Hickory. So definitely just curious, honestly, about these stories, and I think it'll be cool. So hopefully next week we'll get to do that. We'll be back same time, same place on America's Most Famous Podcast. So Cale, it's been good to hang out with you. Thanks for doing this again.
Oh, absolutely, man. I love it.
Yeah, man. So catch us next week, same time, same place, America's Most Famous Podcast on the Hickory Racing Network.